Phyllis Diller was one of the most unique and unforgettable comedians of her time. She stood out with her wild hair, outrageous outfits, and constant jokes about her imaginary lazy husband, Fang. Millions laughed at her routines, but very few knew that behind the cackle and the jokes was a woman carrying heavy secrets. For more than 30 years, she made weekly visits to the same place, a place hidden from her fans, where she spent time with someone she loved more than anyone else. This person's condition was something she never mentioned on stage, something too painful to share. Those visits ended in 1993, and with that, the deepest heartbreak of her life began. What Phyllis carried inside explained why she never stopped working, even when her heart was failing and her body was giving out. She was born in Lima, Ohio on July 17, 1917, to parents who were considered old for their time. Her father Perry was already 55, and her mother Frances was 36. Growing up, Phyllis was constantly surrounded by much older people, and as a result, she attended more funerals than most kids her age. Instead of being afraid of death, she grew strangely fascinated by it. That unusual comfort with dark and morbid subjects later became part of her comedy style. Even though her family was Methodist and proud of their German and Irish roots, Phyllis rejected religion early in her life. Hardships came to her young, but rather than turning bitter, she turned funny. At Central High School in Lima, she became the class clown outside of lessons. She loved to make her classmates laugh, never realizing those small moments were the first steps toward a lifelong career. When the Great Depression crushed the economy in the 1930s, her family was financially ruined. To help, she sold newspapers and learned early on how to work hard for survival. Her original last name had been Triber, but it had been changed generations earlier to Diller, something she only discovered much later in life. In her childhood home, quiet and often lonely, she escaped by making up stories, and those stories eventually began sounding like punchlines. Her first true passion, however, was music. At just 10 years old, in 1927, she was accepted into the Sherwood Music Conservatory in Chicago. She had extraordinary piano skills, far beyond her age. By 1939, she was already playing with professional orchestras. It seemed like music would be her life, but she suddenly quit. It wasn't because she wasn't good enough, she was very talented, but she compared herself to her teachers and thought she would never reach their level. She gave up something she loved, and it hurt deeply, but it also quietly pushed her toward the path she was meant to walk. The depression made everything worse. By 1933, her family's money was gone, and she had to leave Sherwood after only 3 years. She worked any job she could find to survive, slowly toughening herself for the future. Looking back, she believed quitting music may have saved her, because while she hadn't failed, she had rerouted herself toward something bigger. She tried again in 1935, studying music education at Bluffton College, but left in 1937 to get married. 4 years, she regretted that choice, always wondering what her life might have been if she had stayed. But fate had a way of finding her. In 1940, she married Sherwood Diller and moved with him to Ypsilanti, Michigan, where he had work at a bomber plant. Life was difficult. That same year, their first child, Peter, was born on September 27th. The war years brought rationing, and they survived on just $25 a week. The financial strain, mixed with the struggles of new motherhood, left Phyllis with postpartum depression. Between 1940 and 1945, they moved at least 8 times, finally settling in California. Sherwood got work at the Alameda Naval Air Station, but money was always short, and Phyllis became the one holding the family together. While she did housework, she found comfort in the radio shows she listened to. The jokes and voices filled her imagination and planted the seed of something new. In 1944, she gave birth to her second child, Sally. Around this time, Sherwood was often unemployed, so Phyllis took a job as a newspaper editor to keep the family afloat. That writing experience became her secret weapon later in her career. But tragedy was never far. In 1945, she gave birth to another son. Some say he was named Perry, others say he was unnamed, but either way, he died just 2 weeks later. The loss broke her heart. Doctors believed it was because he was premature and medicine at the time wasn't advanced enough to save him. She was only 28 and already carrying unimaginable grief. They were living in Alameda, and Sherwood had just lost his job, leaving them in despair. To cope, Phyllis began joining local theater productions in San Francisco, performing on stage as a way to hide her pain. The heartbreak didn't stop. She suffered a miscarriage soon after, and over the next decade she went through 6 pregnancies, with only 5 surviving children. Between 1946 and 1950, she gave birth to Suzanne, Stephanie, and another son named Perry. That made 5 living children in total, but while the family grew, their money did not. Sherwood refused jobs he thought were beneath him and even wasted a $10,000 inheritance that could have saved them. They lived on food stamps and barely afforded powdered milk. Phyllis scraped together $15 to $20 a week writing for small papers while raising 5 children under the age of 10. She had no help and no real support system. To cope, she turned her frustrations into humor, transforming her misery into the material that would later make her famous. Her comedy about lazy husbands, chaotic motherhood, and endless housework came directly from her own life. But in those years, nothing felt funny. It felt like drowning. By 1952, things got even worse. They were evicted from their home for failing to pay $300 in rent. That same year, Phyllis finally got her first steady paycheck as a radio copywriter in Oakland, making $75 a week. It saved the family. She even created a 15-minute segment called Phyllis Diller, the homely friend-maker, where she poked fun at housewife tips. The name was silly, but it gave her a voice and an outlet. Sherwood kept encouraging her to perform, so she finally tried. Her first show was at a veterans hospital, and it was a disaster. She bombed. Patients heckled her while she played the piano, but instead of quitting, she turned the humiliation into fuel. Later that same year, she did her first stand-up comedy gig. Even when she and Sherwood had to pawn jewelry to pay the rent, she refused to give up. She didn't tell anyone how bad things really were. Then came the moment that changed everything. On March 7, 1955, at the age of 37, Phyllis Diller performed at San Francisco's Purple Onion Club. This time, the audience loved her. Unlike other female performers who tried to be glamorous, Phyllis made fun of herself. She joked about her looks, her cooking, her disasters as a mother. She claimed her food could kill people. The audience couldn't stop laughing. What was supposed to be a short booking turned into an 89-week run, nearly 2 years of packed shows. The club made over $100,000 off her performances. Suddenly, this exhausted mother of 5 was being taken seriously as a comedian. She was paid just $100 a week, but that exposure led to television spots the following year. She credited her courage to a self-help book she had read, The Magic of Believing, which pushed her to finally take the risk. After 15 years of homemaking and near poverty, she had found something that was just for her. In 1956, her life changed in a way that no one could forget. She created a stage persona that stood out instantly. She wore a wild horsehair wig, put on heavy and exaggerated makeup, carried a long cigarette holder even though she barely smoked, and dressed in clothes that clashed so badly they looked both ridiculous and brilliant at the same time. She did all of this on purpose. At nearly 40 years old, she knew she had to stand out in order to be remembered. Instead of trying to be glamorous like most women on stage, she decided to do the opposite. She made herself look as unattractive as possible and owned that image proudly. The risk worked. Her bookings jumped by 40% almost overnight. Suddenly, she was appearing on national television shows, and people couldn't get enough of her bold act. She started collecting wigs, eventually owning more than 50 of them, each costing anywhere from $50 to $100, which was a lot of money at the time. Her cigarette holder, which became one of her trademarks, was 12 inches long and made out of ivory. This entire look became part of her legend, but behind all of that, she was hiding the pain of a difficult marriage. Instead of letting it break her, she used that pain to give her power on stage. On June 15, 1958, she released her first comedy album, which had the unusual title Like a Lampshade in a Whorehouse. The name shocked many people, and some stores even refused to sell it, but that didn't stop the public from buying it. The album sold more than 50,000 copies in its first year. Her routines about a lazy fictional husband named Fang were actually thinly disguised jokes about her real husband, Sherwood. She recorded the album in a small Los Angeles studio with only 20 people in the room, but she spoke so quickly and so sharply that the humor exploded out of her. She delivered up to 200 words per minute, her voice racing like her mind. By 1959, she had earned $10,000 in royalties from the album and landed television deals. Even Fang's name came by accident, the result of a typo in a script. Instead of fixing it, she embraced it and built over 1,000 jokes around that name. The album proved something important, that women could be just as bold, just as sharp, and just as fearless as any male comedian. By 1959, she was on the road almost non-stop, performing in more than 150 venues in a single year, including New York's famous Blue Angel Club. She traveled more than 50,000 miles that year and made $25,000, which was 3 times more than she had earned just 4 years earlier. She even had a steel cabinet custom-built to store her 50,000 handwritten jokes. Each joke was written on an index card and carefully sorted by topic. After finishing shows, she would sit at her typewriter and write up to 100 new jokes every single week. She performed so often that once, after a 48-hour drive between gigs, she collapsed from exhaustion. But even then, she refused to stop. On April 5, 1961, something remarkable happened on television. A 43-year-old woman walked onto the set of the Jack Paar show, and everything changed. She wasn't young, she wasn't polished, and she didn't look like the Hollywood stars people were used to seeing. She had 5 children, came from a broken marriage, and had only started doing comedy at 37 years old. Most people in her situation would have given up long ago, but she didn't. She stood under the bright studio lights with her fright wig, her long cigarette holder, and a cackle so loud and strange that audiences either burst out laughing or stared in disbelief. She didn't hide her struggles, she turned them into jokes. She called herself ugly before anyone else could and made her chaotic home life into punchlines that left people gasping with laughter. There was no other woman like her on television. Not one. She was terrified, shaking so badly she could barely hold the microphone, but she kept going. That one television appearance didn't just get her noticed, it launched her into stardom. Soon, she was appearing on The Ed Sullivan Show, and years later, comedians like Roseanne Barr would say she changed their lives. 5 years later, in 1966, she took another risk by starring in her own sitcom, The Pruitts of Southampton, on ABC. She played a once wealthy woman who was secretly broke but tried to keep up the appearance of having money. The show was wild and unusual. In one episode, her character tried cooking a turkey in a washing machine. Strange characters like Paul Lynde and John Astin appeared throughout the series. Partway through, the name of the show was even changed to The Phyllis Diller Show in January 1967. It only lasted 30 episodes and ended in April. The ratings were low, ranking 77th out of 91 shows that season, but even though it failed, she received a Golden Globe nomination. The show also proved something else: Phyllis wasn't afraid to fail. Even when TV Guide later listed it as one of the worst shows ever, she didn't bury it or run away. She kept showing up. During the Vietnam War, she even went on tour with Bob Hope to perform for soldiers, making them laugh during some of the darkest times of their lives. Around the same time, she became a regular face on game shows. In 1967, she joined Hollywood Squares, where she stayed a fixture until 1980, appearing in 28 episodes. From her little booth on the tic-tac-toe board, she fired off unforgettable punchlines. In one famous moment, she ran after a garbage truck shouting, "Am I too late for the trash?" And the driver responded, "No, jump right in." That was her magic. She laughed at herself in ways that made people love her. She didn't act like a star, she acted real. Behind the scenes, tapings of the show felt like parties. She recorded 5 shows a day, made lasting friendships, and gave fans a glimpse of who she really was. She couldn't sing well, she smoked too much, and she barely slept while raising 6 kids, but she turned all of that into comedy. Even Eddie Murphy said her laugh influenced his own style. She was not just joking, she was breaking barriers for women like Ellen DeGeneres, years before Ellen even had a platform. In 1968, she got her own variety show, The Beautiful Phyllis Diller Show, which premiered on NBC in September. It only lasted 13 episodes before ending in December. The show mixed comedy, music, and celebrity guests like Bob Hope, Goldie Hawn, and Norm Crosby. Even though she couldn't sing well, she still sang because she didn't care about perfection, she cared about having fun. Ratings were poor, and the show was cancelled after 3 months. But strangely, even that failure added to her fame. Her outrageous costumes, towering wigs, and wild stage presence would later inspire stars like Lady Gaga. That same year, she joined Bob Hope on another Vietnam tour and voiced the monster's mate in the animated film Mad Monster Party. She was everywhere, even if the ratings didn't always show it. Her career in the 1970s didn't bring her blockbuster success, but she still left unforgettable marks. In 1969, she appeared in The Adding Machine as Mrs. Zero. The movie didn't do well at the box office, but critics were surprised at how emotional and serious she could be when she dropped the comedy act. In 1975, she had a small part in The Sunshine Boys, which went on to win an Oscar, and in 1977, she appeared in The Great Balloon Race. 2 years later, she showed up in A Pleasure Doing Business. Around that same time, she took over the lead role in the Broadway show Hello, Dolly, starting December 26, 1969. At 52 years old, she performed 8 shows a week, pushing herself as hard as ever. Few people knew that behind the curtain, her personal life was falling apart. Her husband Sherwood, who had been diagnosed with mental illness in the 1950s, left her to raise 5 children on her own. She worked constantly, not just for the spotlight, but to pay the bills. In 1976, she became a judge on The Gong Show, laughing and cackling at the outrageous acts that appeared. She also popped up on Match Game PM and even guest starred on The Muppet Show in 1979. From 1977 to 1986, she made multiple appearances on The Love Boat. By the end of the decade, she had more than 40 film credits. She even out-earned Bob Hope in their 1966 movie Boy, Did I Get a Wrong Number? Because her timing and delivery were so good. In 1968, she also released a comedy music album called Born to Sing. The songs were off-key and full of humor, but that was the point. She made fun of her own terrible singing voice. The album included funny renditions of songs like Satisfaction and Hello Young Lovers, and though it wasn't a massive hit, it helped her sell out shows. At the same time, her personal life was falling into deeper turmoil. Her marriage had collapsed, her money was unstable, and one of her daughters, Sally, had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Phyllis visited her daughter every week for decades but never told the public. She kept smiling in public while carrying unbearable burdens in private.